Tranquility du Jour, August 28th, 2018. Hello there, this is Kimberly Wilson, and welcome to Tranquility du Jour, a podcast featuring artists, activists, and authors around the globe spreading tranquility in various ways. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and sorry it's a day late. I was up in New York City for the past few days and realized late last week that I would not get this out on Monday. So my apologies, and hopefully it makes it even sweeter, getting it a day later. Today's podcast is transitions, which is a theme that we've talked a bit about over the past year in particular, considering my transition from selling Tranquil Space, the yoga studio, actually 1 year ago today. And this is about Christine Mason Miller's transition from Santa Barbara, where she lived for over 2 decades, to Milwaukee. So, of course, in this podcast, we discuss the transition, the challenges, the sweetness around it, what it's like to not have a job title, right? So when you've identified with yourself as something in particular, and then that label is shed, then what? And appreciating the small things like turkeys in your yard. And those of you who are listening and may be new to Tranquility du Jour, there's a link in the show notes where you can find out more about what we're doing here with regard to retreats and workshops and blog posts, since 2004, and this podcast since 2005. There's also FAQs. I get a lot of questions about, hey, I'm going to DC, what should I see? Or, hey, I'm going to Paris, what should I see? So all that is on that link, new to Tranquility du Jour. So please feel free to click there. Even those of you who have been around for a while, you may find some new treasures over there. And also, before we dive into a few upcoming events and hearing from Christine, I just wanted to give a little update. So as I mentioned, I was in New York over the past few days. I hopped on a 6 a.m. train Friday morning. I was up there for a training, the masterclass, which is the next level in Victoria Moran's Main Street Vegan Academy. So it was really good. We heard from somebody who worked for the Park Service, and we heard about the issues with wildlife. We had 2 sessions on nutrition, 2 sessions on kind of vegan business branding. We also heard from someone in the Jewish faith and the Christian faith, and talking about the importance of eating plants versus animals. And then another piece that was really cool is we heard from people in the vegan service businesses and vegan product businesses. And the product businesswoman has a cheese company in New York with the most amazing cheeses. So it was a really, really delightful weekend, but it was amazing because Saturday was 11 hours and Sunday was 10 hours. So very, very long. And Friday, we started at 2 and we went to 7. So it was tiny compared to the last 2 days. And then on Sunday night, I did a meetup at this beautiful hotel I was staying at that I just found online, and it looked like old glam, old school, which I love. And it's called the Mansfield, and it's on 44th Street. So right near Bryant Park and the New York Public Library, my 2 new favorite spots. And it was so sweet. We had a really delightful group of ladies. One woman who drove in 2 hours from Pennsylvania, another person who took the train 2.5 hours from upstate New York, and then the rest were from Brooklyn and Manhattan. And some were Tranquil Spacers from years ago. And so it was just an absolute delight. And I thought I'd go for a couple hours, and finally we shut down the bar about 4.5 hours later. So we had a really, really sweet time. And I'll do little blog post on that, on kind of my weekend in New York, because then the next day, Monday, yesterday, was spent really as a big artist day, from going to Strand Bookstore to Peace Food Cafe, my favorite kind of vegan stop there. I took a ballet class at Ballet Academy East up in the Upper East Side. That was amazing, taught by a former American Ballet Theater dancer. She was so, so good. Unfortunately, now she lives in Vegas, so I'll have to go to Vegas to find her, but she was so great. She was subbing. And then, of course, I hung out in the Ace Hotel lobby and did some writing there. I went to the New York Public Library and did some writing there. And it was just a really, really sweet experience. And there's something about kind of, refilling your creative juices in New York that I just always find delightful. And I haven't been up enough recently. A couple other things I wanted to mention. Happy upcoming Labor Day for those of you stateside and who are celebrating, hopefully with a nice long 3-day weekend. And in 4 weeks, I'll be hosting TranquiliT's first trunk show in quite a while. I'm so excited. And this is going to be in my new office space, which is right off DuPont Circle for those of you who are local. Anyone out of town, you are absolutely welcome to join. Would love to have you. There's a link in the show notes and it'll take you to the Facebook event page. But if you're on my mailing list for love notes at KimberlyWilson.com, you can sign up, or TranquiliT's email, you will find out all about this. And it should be a really fun event. And I also wanted to mention, is there a fall design that you wish TranquiliT had? Because I'm pulling together the new ideas for designs for my seamstress to pull together samples and would love to hear your thoughts. And then finally, I wanted to mention a new offering that I just announced yesterday, which is called the Tranquility Salon. And so for the past month, since I created my new office space, which I'm just in love with, I was thinking what would be some fun events to offer there. Of course, the trunk show, but workshops, maybe urban retreats. So 1-day retreats for people who wanted to come in from outside the city. And then also an ongoing series. And that's where I came up with Tranquility Salon. And the idea with that is, back in the days, right, in the 1920s over in Paris, Gertrude Stein had what she called the literary salons, and people like Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Picasso would go and they would hang out on Saturday nights and they would discuss various things, show their art, be critiqued. Of course, that's not what we'll be doing. No critiquing. But the idea is more around the lines of, okay, how can we learn something new? So I'll be giving various kind of lectures around self-care, mindfulness, creativity, and dreams/goals. And then we'll also do exercises within it and have discussion time. And so Tranquility Salon starts later in September 17th. And if you're interested, there's an application and there's a link for all of this in the show notes. So would love to have you. It'll be a 4-week group and I'll be doing more of these, but this will be our inaugural one starting later next month. I'm so delighted. And again, the idea is like, how can we come together, discuss new ideas, be inspired, be informed, and then ideally have takeaways to bring into our everyday lives. So, upcoming events. Year of Tranquility continues. September is all about mindfulness. And then we have writing, entrepreneurship, and meaning. Those are the last 4 months of 2018. And just know you can join anytime. So if you sign up for the annual, you get all the former months. This month we've been focusing on self-care, always a good topic. As I mentioned, Tranquility Salon starts September 17th, and then we've got our next Tranquility du Jour live, which is the fall one on the 23rd of September. We've got the trunk show on the 29th. Lots coming up in the fall. It's my favorite season, so I tend to do a lot this time of the year. And then we've got Softening into Fall Virtual Retreat. So that's October 20th, and that is a lovely kind of retreat experience that you can do from the comfort of your own home. We'll have a live audience here at the Pink Palace, and I'll be walking you through art journaling, creative practices, mindfulness, and seated yoga. Would love to have you all around the theme, of course, of softening into the fall season. Also, we have 4 spots left for Writing in the Woods, and that's the last weekend in October. For anyone who is interested in joining us for that, would love to have you. And of course, there's more details in the show notes and at KimberlyWilson.com on Costa Rica and Italy happening in 2019. Now, without further ado, our beautiful featured guest who's been on here a couple of times before, and I'll have links to those former shows in the podcast show notes. Christine Mason Miller is an author and artist who's been guiding others toward a meaningful life for more than 20 years. Her experience with writing, publishing, licensing, and teaching have established her as an experienced, compassionate authority on how to bring dreams to life, particularly those related to writing and publishing a book. Her online course, The Conscious Booksmith, has supported hundreds of aspiring authors on their book creation journey. She's the author, artist, and illustrator of 4 books, each one distinctive and unique in its topic, scope, and design. Her latest book, which I interviewed her on a couple of years ago, Moving Water, a Memoir, is available on Amazon. So I've got in the show notes a link to her website, her Instagram account, and Pinterest. So follow along. Christine is a beautiful soul with so much to offer. Welcome back, Christine.
Thank you for having me again. It's nice to be here with you.
It's a treat to have you. And, whenever your email popped into my box a couple months ago, I was like, I got to get Christine back on the show. So I'm so glad we were able to make this happen.
Me too.
Now, 2017 was a big year of transition for you. And I want to hear a little bit about the journey, because I remember at one point, I think I got an email from you that was just like, hey, we're packing up to move to Milwaukee, more later. So I was like, oh, okay, well, there you go. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey from lovely Santa Barbara to, I'm sure, equally lovely, I have not been, but to Milwaukee?
Well, first of all, everyone thinks we're crazy. 90% of the people we talk to and we tell them we just moved here from Santa Barbara, most people go, why? Like they just can't fathom. But the reason this whole idea took shape is because my husband grew up here, and he grew up in Wauwatosa, which is part of Milwaukee, moved to California, had his career, raised his kids, all that. And over the past few years, since he retired, he has been longing to go back here. And, it was a conversation that would come in and out from time to time, but it always ended with him saying he would not be able to leave his kids. His kids are grown, but, his son and his son's wife lived a 5-minute walk from us in Santa Barbara, and his daughter and her husband and our granddaughter were only a couple hours away in Santa Monica. So that was just too big of a leap for him for the longest time. And then he just turned a corner at the beginning of 2017 and realized he'd done his job as a father, and his kids were doing great and they had their own life. And yes, it was going to be really difficult to be farther away from them, but it would also, we realized it would also invite opportunities for other kinds of adventures. So that's how it started. It started with this longing on his part, and then us talking and talking and talking for a few months. It was pretty much all we talked about. And then once we decided, okay, we're going to do this, then it all happened very quickly.
And how was it for you to say goodbye to a community that you have cultivated for 22 years? I remember going through for the Tranquility Tour, and you hosted that lovely pop-up in your home. And it's just clear that you had such a tight-knit, close, like people who adored you community.
Leaving our people was excruciating. And it is still something that I struggle with a lot. But I also look at life as an adventure. And even though it was hard to leave our people, I wasn't terribly heartbroken to leave California itself. And I just wanted my husband to have this experience. I wanted him to be able to go back home. And I've moved so many times, even though I've lived in Southern California for 22 years, I moved a whole bunch within Southern California. I moved a lot as a kid. I mean, I just moved a whole bunch throughout my life. So I know that routine. I know how to do that. That wasn't terribly daunting to me. So it like when you give up one thing, then you receive something else. And I just thought, well, it's time for the next adventure, and we're just going to figure out how to make this work to stay connected to the people we love.
Have you found much of a community in Milwaukee? I mean, I know that you had such a strong one in Santa Barbara, so I'm sure it takes a while to build.
We have made some friends, and Larry, my husband, has reconnected with a whole bunch of people who, he's known since kindergarten. So that's been nice to meet them, and it's been great for him to reconnect with them. I can't say we've found our quote unquote community. You know, in Santa Barbara, we lived in this neighborhood where we always ran into people walking their dogs. There was this beautiful nature trail near our house. I mean, we had dinner with our neighbors. Everyone knew everyone, and it was a community like I'd never experienced before. And I'm not sure we'll be able to find that here. Not because it doesn't exist or that we couldn't make it happen, but I don't know. It's this funny thing of being the ages that we are. I'm 50 and my husband's 65. You know, we have all of our best friends and people we've had friendships with for 30 years. And it's kind of hard to think about trying to start that process over again. So maybe I have a little bit of a bad attitude about it now that I hear myself say that.
No, I mean, I think it makes sense. It's like, I mean, how do you replicate something that was so incredibly special? And it's probably just different. You know, it's not going to be the same sort of experience you had in Santa Barbara. It'll be just a different experience.
Right. I think that's the best way to put it. And that's the right way to put it. I did not move here thinking to myself, oh, I've got to have that thing I had in Santa Barbara. I came here knowing we would not have that. And especially in the neighborhood we're in near Milwaukee, there's just bigger pieces of property. Like our house isn't big, but we have 5 acres and people around us have a lot of acreage. So it's not the kind of neighborhood where we're running into our neighbors. So it's just different.
So what has surprised you about this transition? And I'll tell you, just one thing. I pulled out this book that I adore, and I don't know if you've read it yet, Transitions, Making Sense of Life's Changes by William Bridges. Have you found that book?
No, I haven't. That sounds really good.
Oh my God, it's so good. And actually, what I have in my hand is the 25th anniversary edition. So this came out a long time ago. Let me see. Yeah, and so 2004 was the 25th anniversary, maybe, or that's when it was originally published. But anyway, it's just so good because there is not much out there on transition. And I just wanted to read quickly, kind of the 4 rules that he has found that come up around transitions. And he starts with a quote from Alice in Wonderland. Who are you? Said the caterpillar. I hardly know, sir, just at present, Alice replied rather shyly. At least I knew who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have changed several times since then. Isn't that beautiful?
I love that.
And so rule number 1, when you're in transition, you find yourself coming back in new ways to old activities. Rule number 2, every transition begins with an ending. We have to let go of the old thing before we can pick up the new one. Not just outwardly, but inwardly, where we keep our connections to people and places that act as definitions of who we are. Rule number 3, although it is advantageous to understand your own style of endings, some part of you will resist that understanding as though your life depended on it. And then rule number 4, first there is an ending, then a beginning, and an important empty or fallow time in between. And he talks about this fallow time as like the neutral zone, right? So we have an ending, we have the neutral zone, which is the fallow time, and then we have a beginning. And so I'm curious for you, have you found any surprises along the way with regard to the ending? And are you in the fallow time, or do you feel like you're in a new beginning?
I would say I'm still in the fallow time. We left Santa Barbara on June 21st, so almost exactly a year ago, but we did not move into our house until the end of September because we had already made plans to rent a cabin up in Door County. And so anyway, the first 3 months that we were technically residents of Wisconsin, we were not in our house. And so we have not been in our house a full year. We have not spent all 4 seasons in Milwaukee. So I still feel like we both feel like we're still kind of getting to know the rhythms of each season, the rhythms of things that are happening in the city. We're still trying to figure out the rhythms of seeing people, seeing our family. And I don't necessarily feel like I have like really launched into a new beginning here in this new place. It's still very in between.
Right. That's what I wondered, because I pulled up some things from your blog, and in November you wrote, "We have moved and settled in our house. So the phase we're in now is rather mundane. It is getting to know the route to the grocery store and finding a new dentist. It is watching the birds at our newly filled feeders and admiring neighborhood Halloween decorations. And while I love making mental notes of all of these little places and experiences in our new day-to-day routines, I wouldn't call any of it extraordinary. Life is pretty quiet, maybe even boring, but in a blissful, life-affirming way."
Are you sure I wrote that?
It's on your blog.
Actually sounds not half bad.
I know, it's pretty good, right? But I giggled when I read it, just in the fact of like, this idea of really when we are in the neutral or the kind of the fallow period, it's like life is a little quieter, almost to the point where it can feel a bit boring. And for someone, I assume such as yourself, who's lived a pretty active, pretty creative and vibrant life, it can almost be a bit jarring, to have that quiet.
Right. I had to, once we decided we were moving, in that exact moment, I had to decide, okay, I'm just going to have to sort of put my creative and professional pursuits to the side. Everything just has to go away for a while, so I can really be present and get settled without, what am I trying to say? I'll finish something and then I'm ready for the next project. I'm ready for the next trip. I'm ready for the next whatever. And this past year has really been an exercise in letting life happen to me a little bit more than I'm used to. Maybe that's the way to put it. But it hasn't, I wouldn't say it's been super quiet, because as usual, we've still had a lot of visitors, and I'm working on a new book, and, we're doing all these things, but I still don't quite feel like I've begun to establish roots here in Milwaukee yet.
Right. Yeah. And there is something about, I feel like that slowing down of pace that can be a little jarring and yet also oddly empowering, because it's like there's a sense of spaciousness that maybe in our previous lives that were quite busier and active, and not with bad things, but just, with a pretty active community, that it's like, there's this whole shift of reconnecting and finding oneself. And the reason I can even kind of relate to it is, as having sold my yoga studio last year. So that's something, right, that was like my community of 18 years. And,
right.
You have these moments where you're like, oh, my email's much quieter these days.
Right.
And,
yes.
My phone is not blowing up, and, all sorts of things. And it's a little jarring. And yet it's also something that, once you can exhale into it, it's kind of like, I could get used to this.
Yep. Yes. And it's, my husband and I talked a lot about, what is our role going to be in this new community, and what purpose will we serve? Like, is there a reason, some mysterious reason that we're being guided to move back to the Midwest? And are we supposed to be doing something there? And so it was really tempting when I got here to try to figure that out. There's something I'm supposed to do, and there's something that's needed. I'm going to fulfill that role. And I've really had to work to not try to figure that out, and instead to just get used to being here. And like I said, get established rhythms, with my husband, with our family, with friends, with people that we want to visit and we want to come visit us. There's still things under our roof that I'm having to figure out. And as far as what I'm quote unquote supposed to be doing in Milwaukee, that is going to reveal itself in its own time. And I think it's really important that I don't put too much energy to try to solve that puzzle too quickly.
Agreed. You know, this makes me think of, there's this wonderful kind of image that's put out in The Artist's Way where Julia Cameron talks about, if you keep trying to figure out what's my creative project, what am I supposed to be doing, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's kind of like when you're baking bread. I don't bake bread, but I understand this is how it goes, where if you keep opening the oven to see, is it rising? Well, then it doesn't have the opportunity to actually rise. And so I think that's, just such a good image. Also, the same thing with like, are things taking root? Well, if you keep digging up to see if the roots are sprouting, then it can be like damaging to the plant. So it's so important to give ourselves that kind of chance to lie fallow, be a little bored, slow things down, and really listen in.
Yep. It's interesting you talk about digging, because I've just spent the past, I think, 2 weeks pulling up all the overgrowth and weeds in these 2 flower beds that we have and planting new plants and laying down mulch. And I mean, this work is not for the faint of heart.
Right.
And it has been really, I think it feels like a really important piece of establishing my roots here, here in our home and on this land and on this property. And we've been doing a whole lot of work on this land because it was just kind of a disaster when we bought the house. And it's been a really interesting experience of just being with the earth and the dirt and in the quiet and pulling the weeds and shoveling. And, this has been a really important task for me during this transition time.
Yeah, the ability to kind of get your hands dirty, connect with nature. I think that's so, so important during our transitions. And every day, honestly, right? But, I think particularly during transitions.
Yes. Yeah. Getting out. I mean, I was walking around, by the time I was sort of tidying up this morning, I was walking around in my socks because it just felt so good to just walk on the earth.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it is, nature has so much to teach us, right? Because if you think about it during winter, everything is fallow. Fall, things begin to shed, nature begins to shed. So it is this connection to the natural cycles of nature around us is a wonderful reminder, I think, too, of our creative energy or our, the way in which we're, constantly out there. Because if we're living in summer mode all the time, it takes a toll.
Well, it's true. I mean, and it's also interesting you say that, because in Santa Barbara, it was sunny 72 degrees all year round. I mean, I could look outside my window and not know what time of year it was. I could look out my window in March, in January, in July, in October. It always looked the same. And so that has been, I would say, maybe that's been the biggest surprise of this whole transition, is this joy, this unbelievable joy and fascination with everything going on outside our home. Because I haven't, excuse me, I haven't experienced a winter since I was in my early 20s and lived on the East Coast. And So watching everything go fallow, experiencing the snow and the shorter days and the cold, and then seeing the buds come out on the trees. I mean, I haven't been able to watch this process in decades, literally decades. And then, like, just this week, we saw our first fireflies, and we have little fawns going through our backyard. I mean, that has been such an incredible thing to witness and experience. And having rain and thunderstorms, it feels, my husband talked all the time. When he talked about moving back to the Midwest, he kept saying it just feels normal back there. Like California never felt normal to him. And once we got here and started experiencing these things, I understand what he means. Because even though I did not grow up here, I grew up on the East Coast where we do have seasons and all these things. So I know what he means. And that's how it feels. It feels normal. It feels normal to have seasons. It's normal to have rain. It's normal to have these transitions throughout the year. And maybe that's the biggest surprise for me.
Yeah, I love that. I think you hit something really important because I remember one time I was in San Diego, I believe around Halloween. And I was like, this isn't Halloween, it just didn't feel like Halloween. But yeah, being able to follow the cycles. I mean, I guess you can follow like the moon or things like that, no matter what sort of season you have. But I think there is something to that. And I definitely feel like a sense of kind of slowing down and shedding that happens in the fall and winter. It's like can totally curl up and it's normal and, nothing may be happening until you quote unquote bloom into spring, right? And you think about what you want to bring forth. So that's a really good point, despite Santa Barbara weather being, I think what most people would say is absolutely iconic, or preferred.
Mm-hmm, right. It sounds bizarre, but it was actually starting to depress me having sun all year round like that, like those temperatures and no rain. And it actually was kind of, it drained my energy over the years because it is that it's like you said, like you feel like you have to be in constant summer mode and out and active and doing and blah, 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 blah. And here it's, you're invited to stay inside and be still and be quiet and cozy in.
And one of the things that you also wrote is, which I loved, over the past 23 years, for reasons both personal and professional, my philosophy about being a positive force in the world has found a different kind of home, one that rests on the foundation of the words of Mother Teresa, do small things with great love. And, again, having been a guest in your beautiful home, I think that is something you do amazingly well. But can you speak a little bit to how this is showing up for you now or, why this is so important for you and your work personally, professionally?
I don't know if it has to do with age or just certain personal experiences or what it is, but I look back at when I started my career and I wanted to build this empire and I had this huge ambition and I was just going to conquer the world and I was totally fearless and I felt like that was the best way to have a positive impact on the world. And over the years, for a whole bunch of different reasons, my ambition has, or like the breadth of my ambition it keeps getting drawn in closer and closer over the years. It's just come in closer to my home. And, like I said, there's so many reasons why that's happened. I just love the idea of creating beauty in the world and making people who come into my home feel safe and comfortable and loved, because a lot of people have done that for me over the years and at very difficult times in my life. And so part of this came out from this experience that I had during my divorce, and everything was just going haywire. And so many people took care of me, took me in their home, fed me. And like during that year, I decided, I'm like, this is what I am going to do for the people I love for the rest of my life. Like it felt like I received this at the moment that I desperately needed it. And since then, it has been my mission in life. Anyone who walks through my front door, I want them to feel a certain way.
Yeah, you do a great job with that, not only in your front door, but also, I was on retreat with you. Gosh, I guess it was 2 years ago in Ojai.
Right.
And,
right.
Yeah, you do a really great job in that capacity too. And that's not your home, but it is, a place where you're hosting. But it is, I think that we all have our different like philosophies or, quotes or ideas that really stick with us that actually shape and form us. And this seems to be one at least from what I read, that, it seems like has shaped you.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of joy and a lot of love that can be expressed and offered and shared in very small ways. And I think I like the idea too of like surprising people with these little treats, little notes, whatever it is, or they come across something in our house, some little arrangement I've made. I just love the idea of creating beauty. And within my home, there are so many ways to do that. And so I just try to take advantage and create as many opportunities for that as I can, because I think those little moments are more valuable than we realize in terms of just kind of coping with the world. The world is hard and it's very confusing right now, and a lot of people are struggling. And I think where else but in these small moments and in these small acts of love can we get these little morsels of encouragement and inspiration that we need to keep going and dreaming and living.
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece, particularly this idea of like life is made up of these small moments, right? Not these like grand experiences, even though those are lovely, but they're few and far between. And yet every day we have the opportunity to, as you say, create beauty, offer encouragement, try to be a positive force in the world. And whether or not that's through working on a new book, as you say, or setting a table for dinner guests or mailing a package. I mean, there's so many ways in which we can do small things with great love.
Right. And I also really feel strongly about giving the same kind of energy and attention to like washing my dishes that I do to writing my book. I want it to all come from the same source. It could be so easy to get caught in this trap of, oh, I've got to wash these dishes and then I could go do what I really want to do. So I'm not going to give the dishes much attention because I just don't feel like doing it. But it can be meditative. And that's another way to create beauty. I have a clean kitchen at the end of that. And if I have if I have a totally messy kitchen, it means my husband has just cooked an amazing meal and maybe we've had friends over. So I think for me, it's also about making sure that everything I do comes from that same desire to create beauty, that same desire to express myself, the same desire to be present and to be grateful, to live in gratitude. I don't want to live my life like, well, I like doing this, but not that. So I'm just going to rush through that as much as I can to get to what I really want to do. I'd rather keep that attention like steady throughout everything.
And one other question before we transition, because I have one other piece to ask you about, is any additional takeaways that you can think about? like, okay, since June 21st, whenever we headed out this way, and I know you haven't been in your home quite that long, but is there anything else that you're like, this is my main takeaway, or this has been kind of my biggest lesson learned so far?
Well, I'll tell you about the day we moved, because that's an experience that I've turned to again and again and again. And on that day and the day before, everyone came to see us. Our neighbors, our friends, our family, everyone was stopping by, wishing us well, giving us little gifts. One friend brought donuts. Everyone came through. And it made that day like the most painful of the whole moving experience. It was so hard and so sad and so painful. And at the exact same time, it was unbelievably beautiful. And these two pieces, they existed right alongside each other. They were completely intertwined of this amazing, like having this amazing love and this amazing community and circle of people who we loved and who loved us and who were sad we were leaving, but still wanted to send us off with smiles and gifts and well wishes. That is that is that like mysterious sweet spot of life where we, like, I was willing to experience that kind of sadness and loss and grief in order to experience the love that I have for these people and the times that we were able to share together. I think I've just been holding on to that a lot, that yes, this has been hard to be away from everyone, and I really miss our community and I miss being close to everyone so much. And what an amazing thing to have that kind of love in my life. You know, it's grief and it's gratitude all wrapped up in the same package. And so the take home message is keep loving and giving and receiving as much as I possibly can. Because even though there might be a day when I have to grieve the loss of something, the bigger grief would be if I did not give it my all. So as hard as this has been, I'm glad I gave it my all. I'm glad I'm still giving it my all.
And random question, how's Tilda adjusting?
Tilda's so happy. She had never experienced snow and she went bananas. Totally insane.
How old is she now?
She's 8.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah. And listeners, if you have not seen Miss Tilda on social media, she's adorable. And she was so ornery during my pop-up event at Christine's house, but it was amazing. I think she ate one of my book stands and kept jumping up and trying to hang out with me during the talk. It was amazing. I tell you,
you were amazing. You were so amazing. Great. Yeah. She was oh my gosh, she's such a clown. Trying to hog all the attention, and you completely kept your cool.
Oh my God. I'm so used to dogs being a little out of control. To me, Tilda was perfect compared to what I'm used to. She was great. Such personality.
Yes.
Is she a chocolate lab?
She is.
Okay. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yep.
She's gorgeous. So random gear shifting, but I just wanted to touch base on this because I thought this was pretty powerful, is your social media check-in PDF that you created. And, I'm curious because you have been off a bit. I was used to seeing you a lot more, right, on social media. And so that's why when I got your newsletter and it had been, maybe a year, I was like, yay, Christine. But I'm curious what led to the creation of that, or this idea of I'm going to check out a little bit.
I just think there's so many aspects of social media that have gotten out of control, and I've seen too much ugliness on Facebook, especially. That's why I got off Facebook. And here's what I always said for years. I said, if it wasn't for my work, I would not be on Facebook and I would not be on social media. So when we decided to move and I was kind of shutting everything down, I was like, well, I've been saying this all these years. So I deleted Twitter. I got off LinkedIn, got off Facebook. I basically got off everything except Instagram and Pinterest. And I'm not super active on either. And it's funny. I started a little bit of a mindful social media campaign on Instagram, and I was trying to post a lot. And then all of a sudden I thought, well, this is weird. Now I'm just spending more time on my phone, trying to encourage people not to be on their phones. So I haven't quite figured out. I still want to engage in that conversation with people. And a lot of people responded and liked that I was talking about it. And I still have to figure out how to continue that conversation without it making me be on my phone more because I just don't want to be looking at my phone that often.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you've read this, but we look at it pretty much every 6.5 minutes. I think that's the average. Isn't that wild?
I believe it completely. And there's always an article in the paper about some aspect of social media. And I just think there are a lot of aspects of it that finally people are starting to think about and explore and really question. I think and who knows what the next generation will be like. Maybe they'll reject it all. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. But I don't think it's necessarily doing us a great service. I mean, there are definitely ways that I use social media and the internet to keep in touch with people, and there's a lot of positive things about it, but there's certain aspects of it that have just gotten out of control. And I just want to encourage people to think about it more. Think about, how do you feel after you've spent an hour on Facebook, and how does this serve you, and what purpose is social media serving for you, and how is it uplifting your life? How is it adding to it? I just want people to think about it more, or something. Another example is, you're feeling upset at someone, put your phone down. I think it also invites opportunities to be reactionary and communicate when really you should just put your phone down and walk away and, deal with it in another way. And I'm guilty of that myself. I just think there's a lot of aspects of that. And my goal with all of that would be to encourage people to just take a moment and take a deep breath and think about, do I really want to spend the next 20 minutes of my life on Facebook or send this email, whatever? Just stop and think.
I love that. And, a lot of things that you've said actually in this interview, Christine, lead toward this idea of mindfulness. And there's a wonderful mindfulness acronym that speaks beautifully to what you're saying. And it's STOP. And the S stands for stop. T, take a breath. O, observe what's happening. P, proceed with awareness. And I think, oh my gosh, can you imagine if we approach social media in that way? Or
right.
Communications in general. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for asking about it.
So my last question for you, Christina, this is my standard last question is, I'm curious, how do you find tranquility in every day? Because the last time I interviewed you 2 years ago, you'd just written your memoir and you were still obviously living in Santa Barbara. And so now, how are you finding tranquility in your everyday?
It has to do with nature. Like I talked about before, it is we have this huge bird feeder, and the birds are wildly entertaining, if you can believe that. But we have so many different kinds of birds. We have turkey, deer, rabbits, all kinds of wildlife. And just observing that and experiencing that has been a huge source of joy, and definitely brings tranquility into my days every day.
And I think a great reminder too of savoring those moments, right? So it's not like we're finding tranquility constantly or like every moment's beautiful, but it's this idea of really appreciating seeing the turkey trot across your yard or, the bunny, it's these little moments that can make such a difference if we just stop to notice.
It's true. It's totally true.
Well, as always, Miss Christine, thank you so much for being with us. It's always a treat to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I always love talking to you.
So as mentioned earlier, for anyone who would be interested in receiving updates on everything that's happening over here at Tranquility du Jour, be sure to sign up for Love Notes. I send those a couple times a month, and they're filled with resources, an essay, and just updates and ideas on living life with more tranquility. And there's a link to that in the show notes. And then also, I wanted to mention mentoring. So that's something I've been doing a lot of recently, and that's working one-on-one with clients who are interested in growing a business or transitioning to veganism or vegetarianism or a more plant-based lifestyle, or people simply wanting to live life with more tranquility, more ease, more creativity. So there's a link to mentoring with me in the show notes that you can find out a little bit more. And also, as I mentioned, I will have links to my former podcast with the lovely Christine in the show notes. Finally, you can find me on social media, Instagram, where I have lots of photos from my New York trip, Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And also there's a link to TranquilIT, my locally sewn clothing line, link to my 5 books, e-courses, the Tranquility du Jour podcast app, and of course, my passion for animals. All of this, links in the show notes and can be found at KimberlyWilson.com. So finally, if you have a moment to pin a review on iTunes and or share this podcast via social media, would be most grateful. Or if you have a moment to pin a review of any of my books on Amazon or Goodreads, again, would be most grateful. My hope is that it helps others find more tranquility in their everyday. Wishing you a delightful week ahead and again, a beautiful Labor Day weekend. Namaste.